In today's video, we're going to explore one of the most critical and complex eras in American history, the Great Depression, and the presidency of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. By 1932, the United States was suffering from widespread economic failure. Banks had collapsed, unemployment reached staggering levels, and confidence in national leadership had eroded. Franklin Roosevelt's election marked a turning point. With a sweeping set of programs called the New Deal, FDR aimed not only to stabilize the economy, but to redefine the relationship between Americans and their government. In this episode, we'll trace Roosevelt's background, examine the policies and programs of the New Deal, explore the resistance that he faced, and consider the lasting impact of his leadership. Let's get started. Franklin Roosevelt came from a life of privilege, born into a wealthy family that emphasized public service. He attended Harvard University and later Columbia Law School. His career in public service began as a Democrat in the New York State Legislature, continued as Assistant Secretary of the Navy under Woodrow Wilson, and eventually led him to serve as governor of the state of New York. In 1921, Roosevelt was diagnosed with polio, which left him paralyzed from the waist down. The illness fundamentally shaped him, instilling greater patience, resilience, and empathy. Despite his physical challenges, he remained politically ambitious and would become a symbol of determination during a time of national hardship. As president, Roosevelt built a strong team around him. His cabinet included the first woman to hold a cabinet post, Frances Perkins, who he appointed as Secretary of Labor. He also assembled a brain trust of advisors, including social worker Harry Hopkins, who helped shape his policies. His wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, also played a vital role and was an active and influential First Lady. FDR also revolutionized presidential communication with his fireside chats, using the radio to connect directly to the American public. His first address was heard by over 60 million Americans, helping to restore public confidence at a time when it was badly shaken.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
My friends, I want to talk for a few minutes with the people of the United States about banking, to talk with the comparatively few who understand the mechanics of banking, but more particularly with the overwhelming majority of you who use banks for the making of deposits and the drawing of checks. I want to tell you what has been done in the last few days and why it was done and what the next steps are going to be.
In his 1933 inaugural address, Roosevelt declared that the country must act with the urgency of wartime. He reassured Americans with the famous words,
that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
The New Deal was his blueprint for relief, recovery, and reform. During the first 100 days of his administration, Roosevelt and Congress worked rapidly to pass legislation aimed at addressing the most urgent needs of the American people and restoring economic activity. The first goal was relief, direct assistance for those who were suffering. In the first 100 days, FDR signs into law the Emergency Banking Act of 1933. Upon signing this bill, FDR immediately declared a 4-day bank holiday, temporarily closing banks to stop the collapse of the financial system. Only stable banks were allowed to reopen, restoring public trust. Within a week, Americans redeposited their savings in large numbers. The law laid the groundwork for the creation of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, also known as the FDIC, to insure bank deposits, which is still in existence today. Additionally, FDR signed into law the Federal Emergency Relief Act, FERA, signed in 1933. FERA distributed $500 million to states and cities for direct relief and job creation from 1933 to 1935. FDR also signed into law the Public Works Administration, PWA, from 1933 to 1939. PWA funded large scale construction projects, including bridges, houses, hospitals, and even aircraft carriers. Another relief program was the Civilian Conservation Corps, which employed 2.5 million young men in conservation work. Projects included creating state forests, building the Appalachian Trail, and restoring Native American totem poles. And lastly, another relief program was the Works Progress Administration, also known as WPA. This program provided jobs for 25% of the adult population. Workers built schools, tunnels, roads, and even airports. The WPA also supported writers and artists such as Richard Wright, who wrote Native Son while working for the WPA. Next came recovery programs designed to stabilize and reinvigorate the economy. In 1933, FDR signed into law the National Industrial Recovery Act, which established the National Recovery Administration. And the NRA would set industry wide codes for wages, hours, and pricing. Though initially popular, many businesses and consumers grew quite frustrated, and the Supreme Court will eventually declare the law unconstitutional in 1935. Another recovery program was the Agricultural Adjustment Act, which attempted to raise farm prices by paying farmers to reduce production. However, the benefits skewed heavily toward large landowners, and the program was struck down by the Supreme Court in 1936. You also have the Federal Housing Administration, which helped people buy homes by ensuring long term, low down payment mortgages. Lastly, you have the Second Agricultural Adjustment Act, which was signed in 1938. This bill sought to reinstate farm support, paying farmers to store crops until prices stabilized. However, true prosperity for farmers would not return until World War II increased the demand for food. The final R of the New Deal was reform. And in this portion of the New Deal, FDR sought to implement lasting changes. We have the Glass-Steagall Act of 1933, which separated commercial and investment banking and created the FDIC, which insured deposits up to $5,000. You also have the Security and Exchange Act of 1934, which created the Security and Exchange Commission to regulate the stock market and punish financial fraud. In 1935, FDR signed into law the Social Security Act, which introduced old age pensions, unemployment insurance, and aid for vulnerable populations. Funded by taxes on workers and employers, Social Security became a cornerstone of American social policy. You also have the Wagner Act, which was also signed in 1935, and this bill sought to protect workers' rights to organize, to bargain collectively, and even strike if necessary. It also established the National Labor Relations Board to oversee fair union elections and practices. Lastly, you have the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. This bill set a national minimum wage of 25 cents per hour. It limited the work week to 44 hours, and it banned child labor in industries engaged in interstate commerce. With the NIRA struck down, Roosevelt became more openly supportive of labor unions. The Wagner Act empowered workers and gave unions legal protections that they had never enjoyed before. This helped union membership climb from 3 million in 1930 to 10 million by 1941. Roosevelt believed that organized labor could act as a counterbalance to the power of big business, a significant shift from previous administrations. Despite its successes, the New Deal did draw considerable criticism. Political opposition from conservative groups like the American Liberty League accused FDR of expanding executive power too far. Others, like Huey Long and Francis Townsend, criticized the New Deal from the left, calling for more radical reforms. There were also Supreme Court challenges. The court struck down, as we mentioned earlier in the video, several major laws, including the NIRA and the AAA. And in response, Roosevelt proposed the Judicial Reorganization Bill, which would allow him to appoint additional justices if current ones did not retire by the age of 70. The plan was widely seen as a threat to judicial independence and was rejected, even by many Democrats. It marked FDR's first major political defeat, known as FDR's court packing controversy. The New Deal affected different groups in very different ways. After decades of forced assimilation under the Dawes Act, the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934 promoted tribal self government and cultural renewal. Black Americans faced high unemployment and continued discrimination. Many relief programs excluded black workers, and Roosevelt avoided pushing civil rights legislation to avoid alienating those Southern Democrats. Still, some progress was made. Mary McLeod Bethune, for example, held a significant post in the National Youth Administration, and 40% of the Black Americans in this country did receive some form of New Deal assistance. Mexican Americans suffered from discrimination and job loss as well. Many were forced to return to Mexico due to exclusion from relief programs and increased competition from white migrant workers. Economic hardship drove more women into the workforce, but wage discrimination was widespread. Even with Eleanor Roosevelt advocating for gender equality, women often earned less than men for the same work. Roosevelt's policies and political strategy reshaped American politics. He built the New Deal Coalition, a voting bloc that united Southern Democrats, Black Americans, urban workers, immigrants, the elderly, and organized labor. This coalition would dominate national politics for a generation. FDR's presidency also altered the federal government's role in American life. The United States moved from a system of limited government to a limited welfare state where the federal government took an active role in supporting citizens' economic well being. This redefined modern liberalism and left a lasting mark on American political identity. Franklin Delano Roosevelt entered office at a time when many Americans had lost faith in the system. Through the New Deal, he expanded the role of government, implemented structural reforms, and brought new groups into the political process. While not all of his policies succeeded, and quite frankly, many excluded marginalized populations, the overall effect was a significant rethinking of how government could respond to national emergencies. It should be noted as we close, the New Deal did not get us out of the Great Depression. That would be reserved for our entrance into World War II, which is a topic for another video. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.